I'm Maggie Macario-Doyle, a Monaco ambassador, and it is certainly an honor and a privilege for us to be hosting these discussions as part of this remarkable festival, From Earth to Space, Art Breaking the Skies. Over the next 3 weeks, visitors to the festival will have the opportunity to explore how artistic expressions and scientific discoveries fuel on one another, deepening our understanding of the cosmos and our place within it. I would like to take this opportunity to acknowledge the visionary whose leadership has been instrumental in making this festival a reality. She's here with us, Alicia Adams. Please stand up, Alicia. She's the Vice President of International Program. And her associates also, Gilda Almeida. Now you may all be wondering, how is Monaco involved in space? While Monaco is often associated with luxury and the glamour of the French Riviera, it has also a remarkable history in scientific advancements and international collaboration. For over a century, Monaco has been a leader in environmental stewardship, particularly in ocean conservation, and has long championed international scientific collaboration. In the past 2 decades, we have expanded our focus on the space sector, recognizing that space is not just the final frontier. It is a realm of endless possibilities. It offers innovative solutions to global challenges, drives new technological advancement, and reminds us of our collective responsibility to protect and sustain life on Earth. Significant milestone in our space endeavor includes, in 2015, the launch in partnership with Turkmenistan Space Agency, of Monaco's first telecommunication satellite into geostationary space orbit over the equator. Today, Monaco Sat-1 is serving 1.6 billion people in Europe, the Middle East, Northern Africa, and a portion of Central Asia. Another example, Venturi, a Monaco-based company renowned for its high-performance electric vehicle, is now in the forefront of pioneering advanced battery and wheel technology for lunar terrain vehicles, and has become a key strategic partner in Astrolab's lunar rover development. I hope you will also take the opportunity to explore the prototype of the Flex LTV rover developed by Astrolab and Venturi on the front plaza of the Kennedy Center. To cement our commitments, our Sovereign Prince Albert officially opened in 2021 an Office of Space Affairs to better support our space-related activities. Furthermore, the Monaco Office of Space Affairs, as a founding member of the Space for Oceans Alliance, is now leveraging space technology to protect our ocean. This initiative, launched with Highness, the Norwegian Space Agency, UNOSA, and UNESCO's Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission, will be formally introduced this June at the United Nations Conference taking place in Nice, France. Equally, Monaco is deeply committed to supporting the arts and culture, especially initiatives that push the boundary of human creativity, such as this festival is doing. The intersections between art and science is where magic happens, and we're proud to be part of it. With that in mind, I'm honored to introduce former NASA Associate Administrator and astronaut Robert Bob Cabana, who will moderate our esteemed panel for what promises to be a compelling and most insightful discussion. I would like also to salute each of our panelists for their own incredible pioneering venture within and beyond Earth's orbit, and warmly thank them for their support and the friendship of Monaco's foray into space. And to all of you, thank you for being part of this experience, and looking forward to a most productive discussions. Thank you all.
Madam Ambassador Maggie, thank you for that warm introduction. I'll tell you, it's a real privilege to be here today to participate in this event for Monaco and also for the Kennedy Center, where art meets science. There's some marvelous exhibits for everyone to get out and see, so thank you. I want to introduce this panel. I am blessed to moderate a panel with these experts on it. This is a pretty august group, starting off with Senator Bill Nelson. He brings a wealth of experience to the panel as the 14th NASA administrator. I had the privilege of working for Bill for 3 years in that position. And he was also a crew member on STS-61, which was the 24th shuttle mission in 1986 aboard Columbia. He's been a huge advocate for NASA and for space exploration throughout his time in Congress in both the House and Senate. Thanks, Bill. Jaret Matthews, oh my gosh. He is the founder and CEO of Astrolab, and we're going to hear more about that, but he spent 7 years at SpaceX, and prior to that, 10 years at the Jet Propulsion Lab out in California working on rovers, including Spirit, Opportunity, and the Mars Science Lab rover Curiosity. And I want to hear all about the new Astrolab rover that's going to the moon. Mike Lopez-Alegria, he's a former NASA astronaut, and he's currently the Chief Astronaut for Axiom Space. He's flown 3 shuttle missions, was commander of Expedition 14 on the space station. He's been a commander of 2 private Axiom missions. Mike's my hero, man. He's who I want to emulate. And he also, during his NASA missions, conducted 10 EVAs totaling over 67 hours in space. Thanks for participating, Mike. And last but certainly not least, Dr. Ellen Stofan, my good friend, currently the Undersecretary for Science and Research at the Smithsonian. She's the former NASA chief scientist. That's where I got to work with her. And chief scientist at NASA's Jet Propulsion Lab out in California. She worked on missions to Venus, Earth, Mars, Saturn, and is currently on the science team of the Dragonfly mission that's going to Saturn's moon Titan. So, pretty impressive group. So let's get right to it. Now, the first question, this is what everybody wants to know for starters, and it was also one of the questions from the students that are participating in this event today. Why do we explore? Is it worth the cost? Why do we do what we do in pursuit of exploring beyond our home planet? Who wants to go first? Dr. Stofan.
I'll go, because I'm going to give the answer you all are going to expect me to give, and that's it's about knowledge. It's about a fundamental understanding of our planet. How did our planet form? How did life originate on this planet? What is the state and health of our planet right now? The way we understand that is by going out beyond Earth to study other planets, to compare back to our home planet, to understand how do atmospheres work. We would not understand climate change if we couldn't compare Earth's atmosphere to that of Mars or Venus or Saturn's moon Titan. So it's that gain of knowledge for the really big questions, the really fundamental questions that we have about the universe and our place in it.
I'll go next. I think there are at least 3 good reasons, and since there are 2 more panelists, I'm going to leave the other 2 for them and think about it in different ways. So certainly exploration is, when Columbus was looking for a passage to the Indies and stumbled upon America and the westward expansion of the United States. And certainly when we went to the moon, and as we will go again back to the moon with the Artemis program, but there's a lot of space flight that is not what you would call exploration, at least in that context. And I want to talk about the work that's being done on the International Space Station today. And that includes understanding better how to deliver medications via protein cell crystal growth, how to build better semiconductors, for example, to make faster chips. One day, how to have an orbital data center where we have not only the ability to store, but also process data in space that makes it more efficient to collect and use all those data in space rather than sending it all down to be processed on the ground with the limited bandwidth we have the capability of. So I think in addition to the exploration that's what's around the corner or on the other side of the mountain, we should think about exploration that's done, let's say, right in our backyard at 400 kilometers above our head every day for the last 25 years.
Thanks, Mike. Jaret?
So I won't add to the why part, but I'll address maybe your second question: is it worth the cost? I think there's generally a public perception that when you hear of a multi-billion-dollar spacecraft that maybe NASA stuffed a shiny box with $100 bills and sent it off into the solar system, but that's not actually what happens. That money actually gets spent here on Earth, paying companies to invent new technologies, to employ really smart people to work on really hard problems. And there's secondary and tertiary benefits to all that effort that directly benefit life on Earth. Beyond that, I was always enamored with the starting premise of Star Trek, which is that you're at a kind of point beyond scarcity. No one wants for anything. You press a button, food comes out of a machine, everything's automated. And what do they choose to do with their time? They choose to go explore the universe, right? And having that as the kind of driving reason to go into space, to just understand the universe and our place in it, I think is reason enough.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. We haven't spent a single dollar in space. They've all been spent right here making our economy better and advancing our technology. Yeah. Senator Nelson.
And I would sum up what all of you have said. It's the yearning to know who we are, what we are, and where we are. And the exploration of the cosmos gives us a better understanding of how we are here on this globe suspended in the middle of a vacuum of space. And the more that we explore, we understand more and more just how small, even insignificant, we are in this expanse of a universe that we now know as a result of a NASA scientist getting the Nobel Prize. This universe is 13.8 billion years old. And now with the James Webb Space Telescope, we have actually peered back and captured the light of the formation of the first galaxies about 290 million years after the very beginning. So you think about that. We're trying to understand who we are, what we are, where we are, and now we're capturing light that was emitted to us over 13 billion years ago, and it is traveling at the speed of light to get to us, which is 186,000 miles per second. That's a pretty big place. And I haven't figured out who we are and where we are and what we are yet, but I'm still anxious to know.
I had the privilege of watching the James Webb Space Telescope launch with the administrator when we were down in Florida. It launched from French Guiana, but we couldn't make it down there because of COVID and a few other things. But it was Christmas, and that was pretty special. We could spend a whole hour just talking about James Webb and all that it's done, and maybe we'll come back to some of that. When I got selected to be an astronaut, I worked for John Young, one of my heroes, and his office was right around the corner from mine. And John always said, single planet species will not survive. At some point, there'll be another event like the asteroid that took out the dinosaurs when it hit the Yucatan, and we need to be ready for it. We need to be able to live beyond our home planet. And so I think that's part of it too. It's our destiny to explore and learn how to survive in this where we are. So along those lines, when I look to technology that's needed for exploration, what do you think is the one innovation that is most needed for us to explore beyond our cosmos, to be able to survive, to establish a presence beyond our home planet? Jaret, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I can talk about a couple specific ones that we're currently working on. We're building rovers to operate for years on the moon. The moon is a very harsh environment, cryogenic temperatures, hard vacuum, radiation, very abrasive dust. If I could have the benefit of one of my slides, I could actually show you what that looks like.
I apologize. We got started a little right on this. Oh, Man,
Yeah, so-
somebody's really quick on me there. Super.
If you haven't seen it yet, this is parked out in front of the Kennedy Center. This is the FLEX rover, the Flexible Logistics and Exploration rover. And what's unique about it is it can do a lot of things. It can both transport suited astronauts in an unpressurized rover format. It can do logistics, exploration, cargo transport, a whole multitude of things. And that's because it has a modular approach to payloads. And we think that's an important step forward. In the history of rovers, certainly the ones I worked on at JPL, they were each bespoke for each mission. And they took, years and billions of dollars to develop. And that was appropriate because you only had, one shot a decade to pull off those missions. Now that NASA has made these tremendous investments, particularly in commercial launch and reducing the cost of getting to space and increasing the frequency of getting to space, it doesn't make sense necessarily to make bespoke platforms for each mission. And so at Astrolab, we're making this modular, reusable system to take advantage of the increasing cadence of launches and landings that are coming down the pipe, as well as the increased tonnage of material that will be delivered to the lunar surface. Both SpaceX and Blue Origin are working on landers that can land 10 to 100 tons of cargo on the moon. And we're trying to solve the next logical problem, which is how do you move all that cargo the last mile? If you could get one more slide to address your specific question about technologies. So a couple we're working on with our partners in Venturi, which, as the ambassador mentioned, is a company based in Monaco, are advanced batteries to help us survive the long lunar night, where you have no sunlight for up to 2 weeks, as well as compliant, resilient tires that are designed to be durable and robust in this cryogenic, harsh environment.
Okay, thanks, Jaret. Ellen, Dr. Stofan, you got what technology, what innovation do we need to explore?
Propulsion.
I'm with you.
Propulsion. When I was, I think in junior high, I went to the launch of the Voyager spacecraft, which about one of them is still not out of the solar system. I'm 64. One of them is still not out of the solar system, and one is just, we think, out of the solar system. It takes too long to get anywhere. I study the moons of Saturn. Right now, with conventional propulsion, it takes 7 or 8 years to get out to Saturn. If we want to move humans out into the solar system, or even thinking of going beyond, we need faster propulsion. We eventually need near light speed propulsion, and right now we're really far away from it. And so whenever I go out and give talks to school kids, I tell them at the end, pay attention in math, work on your math, and go home tonight and invent near light speed propulsion. That is your homework assignment. Trying to get them, for one, to see math as a tool that helps us get somewhere, but it is literally a tool that helps us get somewhere, and that's, to me, it's all about what, and we can start with nuclear thermal propulsion. There are ways we can start moving faster, but boy, it's all about propulsion.
I'm with you. I want that Star Trek warp drive. But I'd settle for something, right now, for us to do a Martian mission, it's like 1.5 years to 2 years. It's 6 to 8 months to get there, another 6 to 8 months on the planet Mars for the planets to align for another 6 to 8 month trip home. And that's with current propulsion, chemical propulsion technology. We're looking at nuclear propulsion. We need to be able to get there in weeks, not months. So we got a ways to go, but I agree. Mike, anything you want to add?
Amen.
Yeah, all right.
May I add
You
something?
may.
It is so self-evident, to answer Bob's question, what you all have agreed to. And yet, to get over the inertia of getting the money to start serious research and development in nuclear propulsion, in nuclear thermal, but especially nuclear electric propulsion. It was one of the hardest things that we had to do at NASA. First of all, I had to convince the budget office of the White House, called the Office of Management and Budget, and they were just dead set against it. And finally, I got a pitiful $5 million in there, really, as a placeholder. But we had to convince the Congress as well. They were all glommed on to nuclear thermal. But I think you've got to have both. And just to give you a concept of what Ellen and LA said, we are discovering, and over the course of the next 2 telescopes that we put up in space, first of all, in a year or two, the Nancy Grace Roman telescope, and then about 2040, the Habitable Worlds Space Telescope. Between that and the James Webb and what Hubble has already done, with those 4 telescopes, we're going to be able to identify planets circling around other suns or stars that have the chemical makeup for life. So let's assume that we find one. Let's assume we can get, unbelievably, to the speed of light in our propulsion. And yet, one of them is out there 100 light years away. It's going to take us 100 years at the speed of light. The distances are so far. There's got to be some kind of major technological breakthrough to do the kind of exploration that we're talking about. The final comment I'll make. That little spacecraft that Ellen talked about that's just now getting out into interstellar space, we are still receiving signals. And it takes those signals at the speed of light 22 hours to come to our big dishes in Canberra, Australia. That gives you some concept of the magnitude of this.
With less computing power than in your car key.
Yeah. Pretty amazing. All right, so here's a question everybody wants to know. Moon or Mars, or both? You know, it's a topic of discussion. Do we need to go to the moon first? Why don't we go direct to Mars? What's the best options? Who wants to tackle that one?
Well, we don't need to go to the moon, just go to the moon, because we did that a half a century ago. But we need to go to the moon in order to learn, to live, to experiment, to invent, to create, so that we can send humans all the way this long distance to Mars. The moon's 3 or 4 days away. Mars, as Bob said, is months and months. And once you get there, you're going to have to be on the surface for quite a while until the planets realign to get back.
Jaret?
So having worked both on Mars and now lunar rovers, I can tell you for a fact that designing for the moon is much more difficult. Certainly getting there to Mars is harder, but actually operating on the moon is really challenging, particularly because of the long lunar night and keeping your systems warm without receiving solar energy for a couple of weeks. I'm a big proponent of Moon and Mars and doing these things in parallel as much as we can, because I just want to see it all happen in my lifetime and as quickly as possible. So I agree with you. There's a lot to be learned on the moon, and the fact that it's only a few days' journey away is super helpful. But it is also very challenging. And what I'm excited about is because NASA has thoughtfully invested in these commercial launch capabilities that can go to both destinations, that maybe we can pursue some of these things in parallel going forward.
I'm a moon first guy. I think it makes a lot of sense for the reasons the Senator and Colonel Bob have already said. It's just much more practical to go there. And we can go there with a lot more purpose. So I mentioned the orbiting laboratory we have on the International Space Station. We'll imagine that type of installation, but on the lunar surface, where you could really get into in-situ resource utilization, learning how to build habitats out of the regolith. I mean, I think the things are endless. The one that's often bandied about as well is to take the liquid ice that's, we think, down on the poles, especially the South Pole, and be able to extract hydrogen and oxygen, both of which are very useful for anywhere, but particularly in space. So I see us focusing at least human exploration on the moon first. Continue to send probes to Mars, by all means. It's a great place to learn things robotically, but for all the reasons said, the logistics train to have any kind of a human presence on the moon, even just to spend one mission there, is enormous. To put a base there would be, I think it's really inconceivable with today's technology until we get that holy grail of propulsion solved. The kids doing their math homework.
Former NASA chief scientist, what are your thoughts?
I'm going to be the controversial one. You know, I'm a Mars person, and the fundamental reason for me is that the conditions on early Mars were so similar to those on early Earth. Life evolved here almost right away, and so those conditions on early Mars would have been really, really good for life, the formation of life. I think it's going to take astronauts on the surface of Mars breaking open a lot of rocks to find evidence of that past life. Did it have DNA? Did it have RNA? How different was it than the evolution of life on Earth? And that's going to take people. We just can't do it with robots. And I really thought about this a lot during the 50th anniversary of Apollo, where we were thinking, you know, in the early 1960s, you know, when Kennedy made that famous speech at Rice in 1961, I won't do the accent, that we were going to make it to the moon before the decade is out. We didn't have spacesuits. We didn't know how to do interplanetary navigation. We didn't have rockets that were actually reliable. We'd never done a spacewalk. And we figured it out, and we figured it out in under a decade. And so I maintain if we want to go to Mars, we can go to Mars. We just have to decide to go to Mars.
So I agree with you. We have to decide, we have to have the national will, and we have to have the funding. During the Apollo program, NASA had almost 5%, at least 4.5% of the national budget. NASA has less than half of 1% now. Take NASA's budget, $23 billion, and multiply it by 10. If we had $230 billion, I mean, it's amazing what we could do, but we don't have that kind of discretionary spending now. So it comes down to that national will and funding also.
And without that, we can't. So in the meantime, I think a parallel is what we do, but that's not what I want.
I understand, and that's why I asked. That's why you're on the panel, Dr. Stofan. No, and I really do. You know, going to the moon, we're not going like we did during Apollo. It's not a 2 or 3 day camping trip. We're going to establish a presence. There are reasons to go to the moon. There are resources there. There's a lot that we can learn in the systems that we can prove. And if we can develop that capability someplace that's 2 or 3 days from home when things go bad, it's a lot better than, you know, 6 to 8 months from home or more. So that brings up the question, when do you think we'll be ready to go to the moon? I mean, I've read studies that say in order for humans to Mars, I've read studies that say in order to go to Mars, we need to pre-stage like 16 to 18 metric tons on the Martian surface for humans to be kept alive and have the possibility of coming home. The Mars Curiosity rover was 1 metric ton. That's a huge leap. Any thoughts from anyone on that? Yes, sir.
2040s. And I just want to add on to what Ellen said. She made the scientific case for going to Mars because of, other than a moon of Jupiter, where we think there could be life in the ocean underneath the 3/4 of a kilometer solid ice sheet. There's an ocean. And we think there could be life there, and we've got a probe that's on the way right now. But otherwise, the clue for life in this solar system, we think, is Mars. Now, for the last 4 years, we've had a rover on Mars the size of a truck that is digging a cores this long, the size of a cigar, sealing them in titanium tubes. And when it gets through, there will be 32 of these titanium tubes filled with cores from a dry lake bed and from a place where a river came down into the lake and then up the edge and on the top, what they call the rim of the crater, Jezero crater, what was the surface above the lake. That will give us the clues if we can get that back before our astronauts go there. They can go to some other location instead of Jezero crater. I'm telling you, we have had a battle royal to get those samples back. Because what happened, it was way over time, it was way over budget, it was ballooning to $11 billion when in fact the cost originally was about $5.5 billion. And so we pulled the plug on it and we said start over. And we actually has, unless this administration changes it, we've actually got a plan now that could bring it back in the mid-2030s, and it could keep the cost at about $6.5 billion. And so that's underway, and that's going to give our first clue. Was there life there millions and millions of years ago?
So when we discover life somewhere other than on planet Earth, either in our solar system or beyond, what's that mean? What does it mean if we're not the only life? And I have a question for you also. Now, NASA administrator, former NASA administrator, all the knowledge and stuff, where are they hiding the aliens? But
I can't talk about the alien colony in the rainforest in the upper Amazon region.
So, Ellen, what does it mean that there's life somewhere else other than on Earth?
Well, you know, you can look at it from 2 points of view, right? The scientific point of view, where again, there are these fundamental questions that we have still about how life evolved, what molecule, you know, this is going to get really sciencey, you know, are there things other than which, you know, we have a certain number of amino acids that are in all living things on Earth. Is there different chemistry to life from elsewhere? There is a small chance that there was a single origin of life. For example, life could have evolved on Mars and been delivered to the Earth. We have Martian meteorites here on Earth. I think that's low probability, but we can't rule it out. So if we found life on Mars and it was exactly like life on Earth, we'd say, wow, maybe there was only one origin of life. And then we want to go out to those moons in the outer solar system and say, are there multiple origins of life? So all that stuff, blah, 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 that was all the science, you know, the nature, the chemistry, the how, the why. And then there's the philosophical. And I think since there have been humans looking up at the night sky, we've wondered, are we alone? And if we find multiple origins of life in our own solar system, that means the chances of life outside our solar system on those thousands and thousands of planets that we know exists on billions, to quote Carl Sagan, of planets out there, it means the chances of there being life, but even maybe intelligent life, all of a sudden gets that much higher. And I think that will be a profound philosophical, you know, to me, a boost. Some people find it scary. I don't. If they had the technology to get all the way here, I don't think they'd be hungry. So I think, you know, I think it'll change our outlook on our world and our universe.
Awesome.
I love that. But I have to say, you know, for me, so there are engineers and there are scientists. And for me to think about science is like a child looking at a comic book, but in my adult life, I'm an engineer. And so I'm fascinated by the curiosity that you have about life on other planets and its origin, and, you know, Senator Nelson's questions about who, when, and where we are. I think that's great, but I also think that we're in a very resource-constrained environment, and we can't spend all of them trying to answer those very philosophical and fundamental questions while at the same time abandoning sort of the practical things that we need to do to get there, like develop a rover, or, you know, someday have the ability to have in space fueling depots from the oxygen and hydrogen we got off the surface of the moon, or what's going on again in low Earth orbit with all the drug discovery and things that are advancing, making life better today for people on Earth. which gets back to your very original question, which is it all worth it? Well, I think the answer is clear that yes, it is, because of those advances that we've learned by our space exploration.
I just wanted to challenge Bill's timeline maybe on the humans to Mars question a little bit. I think it's hard for people to appreciate really that technology is experiencing exponential progress right now. And in this calendar year alone, there's going to be 5 separate commercial companies landing on the moon. There's already been 2 attempts, one completely successful, one partially. There's another en route. And then, Blue Origin's planning to land later this year, and then our mission on Griffin 1 with Astrobotic is later this year as well. That's an extraordinary change of events, compared to prior years, and it's only accelerating. And when I started at SpaceX, we were getting off about 1 rocket a year at best. Sometimes it was every 18 months. Now it's every 2 days. And getting faster. And so I think the answer is more like early 2030s, if not 2030. Yeah.
I love your optimism.
I think that'll be awesome, Jaret. So that brings me back to a point from earlier. We're talking about the commercialization of space. We're talking about public-private partnerships enabling commercial space operations. We're talking about international partnerships. Having 2 guys here actively involved in the commercialization of space, I want you to answer first. But Mike, you're working for Axiom Space. You're their chief astronaut. They're designing a suit. They're designing a space station. How do you see commercialization of space? How do you see these private public partnerships working? Is there a future?
Well, I think it starts back in the aughts when NASA made the decision to, instead of building a rocket and a capsule to take cargo to the ISS, they commissioned some companies to do that and are buying the services from that. They extended that to Crew, which is obviously successful now with SpaceX, and I think soon will be with Boeing. And the next step is to have a commercial platform in low Earth orbit to replace the International Space Station. So for context, all those great things that I said about the ISS, while true, are finite because it is a machine and at some point it's going to wear out. The governments have decided, as of today anyway, that 2030 is the deadline, and so a couple companies, Axiom definitely included, is planning to build a commercial platform to succeed the ISS, to continue all of that work that we've been talking about a little bit earlier today. So I think there are 2 aspects. One is the transportation, which I think is largely solved, at least into low Earth orbit, both for the cargo and crew standpoint. Now we need to start focusing on the destinations. And the third piece that you mentioned, which is the spacesuits, we are in fact developing the suits that will be worn by the astronauts who next step on the moon and in the Artemis program, as well as sort of a derivative of that suit that will be used to replace today's extravehicular mobility unit, which is the long name for the spacesuit that is used on the space station, which was conceived to be used on the space shuttle, meaning it was meant to be launched into space, do an EVA or 2, come home and be refurbished. Not able to do that. It's quite heavy and takes a lot of lift to get it to space and back, so they stay on orbit for months and months, and it was not designed to do that. And we're seeing that they're wearing out pretty fast, and the availability for us to be able to do an EVA, I'll say whenever we want, is quite limited. So those 2 products are going to supplement NASA's fleet, first an existing EMU, and then of course the Artemis suit.
I think we got a picture of you in the suit. Can we find that picture of Mike? And yeah. So as an expert, having done 67 hours, 10 EVAs worth of spacewalking, how do you like your new suit?
It's very flexible. We had a few photos to choose from. This is from a test that we did on Jaret's rover, actually, and the rover is purposely blurred out so we don't say anything proprietary here, but we were doing some what we call human-in-the-loop tests with my colleague Koichi Wakata, former Japanese astronaut, now at Axiom as well. And our purpose was to just do some tests to evaluate getting out of, preparing the rover to drive, and also to rescue an incapacitated crew member should that be necessary. But the suit itself is very different from the EMU. I mean, first of all, it's meant to be walked in. Obviously, you can see we're being suspended by a weight relief system, which for some reason is called Howard. And when we want to go lower ourselves down, we say down Howard or up Howard. But you can walk around in it without any support, actually quite comfortably. You know, the suit, the pressure actually makes it stand up a little bit, so it's pretty interesting. But amazingly, you can actually bend down and pick up a piece of paper off the ground, which is phenomenal. I've actually seen a picture of somebody, not me, in a pressurized suit doing the splits. So the advances really, I would say the technology, insofar as the electronics and all that, is probably significantly advanced, but what you really notice difference-wise is the mobility of the suit. It's extraordinary. Some of you have probably seen some imagery of the Apollo astronauts that look pretty clumsy. They're on the surface of the moon, and I think in some cases one fell down, and it took a long time to actually get somebody to come over and help them get up. I mean, that would not happen with this suit. So, as Jaret said, things are advancing pretty quickly.
So, Jaret, you mentioned your partnership at Astrolab with Venturi in Monaco for the batteries. Tell us a little bit about how, as we move into this commercial age, what about partnerships between companies, between the government, between other nations? Any thoughts?
Oh yeah, it's hugely important. This is extraordinarily difficult, capital-intensive work. NASA really deserves a lot of credit for leaning in to the commercial partnerships over the last 10 years. And I think, you know, we're all benefiting from those investments. That's how we got to 2 launches a day. I mean, a launch every 2 days. And now that the transportation problem to low Earth orbit has largely been solved, you're starting to see things like, you know, Starlink be possible. You can put up thousands of satellites, and that in turn generates billions in revenue that then gets poured back into the development of the next vehicle, in the case of SpaceX Starship. NASA is an incredible partner, and we're happy to be, very happy and humbled to be partnered with them on the Lunar Terrain Vehicle program. And it's basically, you know, catalyzing a space economy, both in low Earth orbit and eventually on the moon as well. And the benefit to NASA, in addition to reduced costs, is that it frees them up to do the even harder things. You know, getting to low Earth orbit is somewhat of a mundane task now, and NASA, you know, shouldn't be doing that really. They should be doing things like quadcopters on Titan, which is a real mission, and that's crazy. That's really exciting, because NASA has incredibly talented people that can do the hardest things, and what the commercialization trend is allowing them to do is to leave behind the mundane tasks and really focus on the really difficult tasks.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. You know, I had the privilege of putting the first piece of the International Space Station together, got to work at the Kennedy Space Center and see commercialization really take hold. But I look back to the International Space Station and the model that it is. You know, we've got the United States, Russia, Canada, Japan, the European Space Agency, and all its partners. And in spite of all the geopolitical problems and turmoil here on Earth, we're still working together as one on the International Space Station. And as we go to the Artemis program, establishing a presence on the lunar surface, you know, we're not doing it as any one nation, we're doing it in a consortium again. And I think that's the way it should be. We should be exploring together, the people of planet Earth, not just going out on our own. For one thing, it's far too costly. The partnerships make it more affordable, but I also believe it's the right thing to do. Bill, anything you want to add to that?
The cooperation between the Russian Space Agency and NASA is the only point of contact of cooperation today between the government of Russia and the government of the United States. And it is, as Bob said, this started way back. It started with General Tom Stafford and General Alexei Leonov back in the middle of the Cold War. 1975, Soviet Union. And the two nations decided there might be an area of cooperation. And they blazed the trail with Apollo-Soyuz. After that success, and by the way, those two crews became very close personal friends. So much so that Alexei Leonov, who did the first spacewalk in space, is considered a hero of the Soviet Union, a hero of Russia. So when he died a few years ago, big Moscow state funeral, who did they ask to give the eulogy? General Tom Stafford. And that led to then the first Russian space station, and then a second called Mir. And then it was decided that we would dock our space shuttle to Mir. All of these leading up to then the building of the International Space Station together with the Russians. All of this planning started back during the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union broke apart in 1991, and then the station, when was your flight?
1998.
All right, tell them about taking Sergei Krikalev into the station with you.
So I always have to do what my boss says. I retired from NASA, and I hadn't been retired 3 weeks, and he calls me up and he says, Bob, I got something I need you to do. I'd like you to chair the ISS Advisory Committee. You don't get any money, but you need to do this. And I said, okay. So I'm carrying on General Stafford's legacy, and I'm now the chair on the U.S. side, but my counterpart on the Russian side is my crewmate from that flight in 1998, Sergei Krikalev, a very experienced Russian cosmonaut who's now a deputy in the Russian Space Agency. But what Bill is alluding to is that when it came time to enter the space station, I didn't tell anyone who was going to be the first person to go inside the International Space Station when we put those first two modules together and did the spacewalks to connect all the power and data connectors, and we activated it from the flight deck of the space shuttle. And when we went to open the hatch, I said, Sergei, get up here. And he came up, and when we opened the hatch, here's a trivia question. Who was the first person to go in the International Space Station? And there was no first person. When we opened the hatch, Sergei and I went through every hatch side by side, because I believed if we're going into an International Space Station, we needed to enter it as an international crew. And so that was a very special time. So thanks for bringing that up. Yeah, I want to go to something else. You know, we've been talking about exploration, but there's more than exploration. We talk a lot about it, but what about the importance of our home planet and studying our home planet from space? And I know Monaco has a long and rich history of protecting our environment and of sustainability. And so I'm going to come to you, Dr. Stofan, with your multiple missions to planets beyond Earth. You've also done missions to planet Earth. What about exploring our home planet from space?
Yeah, sure. And if we could go through my slides. To me, when I think about why we explore, it goes back to the science questions. And all these places in the solar system we visited, whether it's Venus, Earth, those amazing moons of the outer solar system where we've got those subsurface oceans Bill was talking about that are actually erupting their subsurface oceans out into space. It's all about this fundamental question about life. How did life originate? Where do we find life beyond Earth? But when I look at these bodies, it's really, think if you were a doctor and you only ever had one patient, you'd have a really hard time understanding the progression of disease. I think of that when I'm trying to understand planet Earth. We use the other planets of the solar system to better understand our home planet. This is one of my favorite images ever, and it's because of that little smeary white spot right below Saturn's rings, the first white. This is an image that was taken by the Cassini spacecraft, and that little smeary white dot you see is planet Earth. And this was taken inspired by Carl Sagan's desire to have the Voyager spacecraft look back at Earth, and it was a very famous image called the pale blue dot image. And the Cassini mission recreated this image, and the pale blue dot is a little sharper in this. But it was really about the fact that of all the places we've explored, there really is no place like home. And Carl Sagan, to me, really said it best: the Earth is where we make our stand. This is our habitable planet, our blue planet that supports life. NASA has done an incredible job. At any given time, there's 17 or 20 satellites up there, numerous instruments on the International Space Station, studying all aspects of this planet, understanding our atmosphere, our oceans, the land surfaces on Earth, how they interact. It's why we understand climate change is happening. And not only that, it's how we can understand how to cope with the changes that come with climate change. So whether it's rising sea levels, wildfires, helping farmers understand how to better use water and better adapt crops to the climates of the future, that's what we're using this Earth data for. And it's critically important. And that spirit of exploration, that of understanding this planet that has long been part of Monaco's culture, I think is really exemplified in a lot of the work that's done using these data from space to really understand our home planet, how to live on it better, how to live sustainably on this planet.
Bill?
We have a couple dozen spacecraft up there on orbit that are constantly monitoring what is happening to the Earth. And it's so much so that we're getting to where we can develop a 3D composite of the precise things that are happening that allows us to inform farmers what's the moisture content of their soil, the disease in a forest that would be a precursor to a wildfire there. It goes on and on. I have to say that the first person that was fired at NASA 2 months ago was the chief scientist and chief climate officer. And so I think we need to be concerned about that. Is the observation and understanding of our climate, is it important to us that we know so that we can be better stewards of what we have, of this extraordinary planet that Mike and Bob and I have had the privilege of seeing from a different perspective? And I think this is where politics starts to get in the way.
All right, I'm gonna bring it to something personable now for everybody that you can share. And for the two space flyers, and I'm gonna ask you, what's your favorite memory from being in space, Mike? You've had multiple opportunities. What's your favorite memory?
Can I have two?
You can have two.
So the first one was on a mission. Actually, you were on ISS 2A, I was on ISS 3A, and we were the last crew to visit the ISS before it became permanently crewed. And so we had, like you, we had docked, we had installed two elements, and then gone out to do 4 spacewalks to connect the lines, fluid lines, and electrical and data lines. And then the last day, we had the opportunity to go inside and look around. It was pretty primitive. It was, what I remember about it, was extraordinarily quiet because a lot of the pumps and fans and all that were not running. But MCC, Mission Control, gave us the go to go and sleep in there. And 2 of my colleagues and I went in to sleep in Node 1. And I was the last one to bed, so I had to turn off the light. And we had brought up a ship's bell. The first commander of the ISS was a Navy veteran, a Navy SEAL, and in the Navy there's a big tradition with ship's bells when you ring it ceremoniously when somebody important comes aboard or goes ashore. So we'd installed this bell, and of course in zero G, the clanger or whatever doesn't hang down all the time. It's very easy to touch it and it starts ringing back and forth. So my crewmates are asleep, and my light switch is here, and my sleeping bag is way over there, and my crewmates are on either side, and somewhere up here is the bell. So I'm very careful. I sort of take aim. I turn off the light, and I push off, and I start floating. And for just a brief minute, I saw nothing because it was pitch dark. I heard nothing because it was very quiet, and I felt nothing because I was floating in weightlessness. And that was a pretty special moment. And I made it, by the way. I did not ring the bell.
That's awesome.
We want that bell for the National Air and Space Museum when we retire
Still
the
up
space
there.
station.
So I'm going to come back to that. You got to have the logbook from the International Space Station. It's phenomenal. It's just, we can come back to that. Your second memory.
Okay, very quickly. So the second one was doing a spacewalk on that same mission, actually. We were testing out something called SAFER, Simplified Aid for EVA Rescue. It's basically an attachment to the backpack of the spacesuit that has a bottle of cold gas, nitrogen, and 24 thrusters oriented in different directions, such that if you ever were to become free from the space station, which is a bad thing, so we're always tethered, and we're very particular about what we call tether protocol. But there's, NASA's very aware of risk, and so we always have sort of a plan B. Plan B, in case we didn't connect it right or somehow the tether would break, is we would deploy this hand controller and then fly ourselves back to the space station. Back in the day of the space shuttle would just go get you, right? I'm sure you practiced doing it.
No, actually, when we were docked with the International Space Station, if somebody would have become untethered and I fired the thrusters to go get them, we'd have broken the stack, and yeah.
What I mean is before the space station, when the shuttle was free flying,
Okay.
all those
when it was
EVAs,
free flying,
yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, my EVA partner, has his feet in a foot restraint at the end of the robotic arm, which is stretched out as far as it could go, and he's basically holding on to me. And we were going to film this thing with these special cameras, and we had to wait for the right lighting conditions. So we were ready early, and one of those rare moments during a spacewalk where you actually have time to look around. We're coming up from southwest to northeast over the Yucatan Peninsula and over the Caribbean as I'm looking down through the shuttle with the small space station attached, and you know what the waters around the Bahamas look like from there. That is burned in my mind. It's one of the most beautiful images I've ever seen.
Could you see the tongue of the ocean?
I don't know what that is.
Really, down in the Bahamas. So the water can be very shallow, but there's this one part down there where the water is very deep, and what you see is this thing that looks like the shape of the tongue, and everywhere else it's kind of like this light blue, except for there, and it's a very, very dark blue, and it's because of the depth of the water. Oh,
you learn something every day.
I knew something that Mike didn't know. All right, now, so Bill, I'm going to ask you what your favorite memory was from STS-61. But I got to ask you, which was more fun, flying in space or dealing with Congress and getting a NASA budget?
That question answers itself, doesn't it? Well, I'm going to tell you two memories. The first one is like Mike. Everybody's gone to sleep except me. And so I sail over into our sleeping bag, which NASA has a favorite saying for everything. It's a sleep restraint. And it's a sleeping bag that on the space shuttle, and I flew early in the space shuttle program, the 24th flight. And so you attach it to something. In my case, you could have attached it to anything. We had guys sleeping on the ceiling because up is down and down is up. And so I'm just getting settled in the sleeping bag to go to sleep, and I noticed that one of our crew members had been so tired, he just fell asleep, and he was floating. And so I see that's what's happening is the air conditioning currents are pushing him toward me. And I thought, well, he's going to be bumping into me and I'm not going to be able to sleep. So I got to fix this. I knew what to do. I sailed out. I went over to the gray sticky tape. I tore off a piece about this long. And I quietly moved over to him, and he had a wire coming out of his flight suit. And I attached the sticky tape, and I floated him very quietly across the spacecraft, and I stuck him to the wall. The end of that sleep period, he woke up, and everybody said, "What are you doing?" So this is really the memory that is seared into my mind's eye. Ellen's a scientist. Ella is a par excellence astronaut, spacewalker, engineer. You are a scientist, a PhD, an engineer. Here's another one, space commander, engineer, Naval Academy. I'm a country lawyer. I'm in space as an elected official. And so I looked through different eyes in addition to everything that we have shared. And as we orbited the Earth every 90 minutes, I look and I don't see religious division. I don't see racial division, and I don't see political division. I see that we're all in this together as citizens of planet Earth.
Amen. So, Jaret, do you have a favorite memory from exploration or your time at SpaceX or Astrolab? What sticks out to you?
Sure. Well, those are pretty hard acts to follow, but it's also two. I'll share two, but they're connected. When I was at JPL, I was working on the Curiosity rover that landed on Mars in 2012, and I was part of the mobility team, and I was on console the night Curiosity landed. And specifically, I was on what's called the mobility downlink team. And one of the systems we had were the mobility hazard cameras. These are the cameras that look just in front of the wheels to see, if there's hazards to be avoided. Well, these cameras were the ones generating the very first images from the surface of Mars that night. And they came to my console first. And so after the extremely exciting touchdown of the Sky Crane system, these images come down, and the photons, hit my eyes first before they hit anybody else's eyes. So I cherish that memory. That was super exciting. And similar feeling when I was at SpaceX. I worked on the Crew Dragon system. I was responsible for designing the docking system the Dragon uses to dock to ISS. And I was on console the very first flight of that system to ISS. And docking is an exhilarating, tense moment in the, after launch, docking is the kind of next most tense moment of a mission. And so being on console and getting the very first confirmation that we had successfully captured ISS, and the last 6 years of my life developing that had been successful. That was an amazing feeling, and I'm really looking forward to having that feeling again later this year when Astrolab has its first rover roll off the lander and get its wheels in the dirt.
Amen. So I couldn't agree with you more on when Dragon docked and how that feels, and the landing of the rover. So I had the privilege of going out to JPL and was in the control room when Perseverance landed on Mars, and having my whole spaceflight experience doing real-time operations and mission control with the space station and the space shuttle. I thought, what's the big deal? Everything happened 9 minutes ago. It's like they can't control anything. They're just getting data back. It either did or it didn't work. It's not a big deal. It's already happened. it was one of the most exciting things I've ever been at. It was amazing watching that come down and getting all the calls and then having everything work successfully. Yeah, it's pretty awesome what we do. Dr. Stofan, Ellen, what's your favorite memory from your time exploring our cosmos?
You know, in 2019, I had the honor of being the director of the National Air and Space Museum. We hold the Apollo collection, not just for the United States, but for the world. And so as we started thinking on how to celebrate this amazing 50th anniversary of the first humans to walk on a body beyond Earth, it was actually my first day as director, and they were talking about how we were going to celebrate it, and one employee slid a picture across the desk. And he said, "Did you know that the Saturn V rocket is about the same size as the Washington Monument?" So needless to say, about a year and a half later, with great, I won't go into how we had to get permission to do this, but in July of 2019, for 5 amazing nights on the National Mall, we put on a show called Go for the Moon that told that story of Apollo to a generation. If you think most people alive now were not alive, unlike some of us on this stage, most people alive now weren't alive when humans landed on the moon. They don't remember what it felt like to see that when humanity puts its mind to something, we can accomplish it. And so for those 5 nights, I wasn't sure it was going to work. The first night, my husband can tell you, I went out of the mall and I saw it up on the monument and I started crying. For one thing, it was a live projection, and so the rocket was actually venting, so you could see little bits of gas drifting down. It was a projection, but it looked, for someone who's been to a lot of launches, it looked real. And then for the last 3 nights, we did a light and sound show called Go for the Moon. If you missed it, Google Smithsonian Go for the Moon, and you'll be able to watch it. And what really touched me is this part we really haven't talked about much today, which is inspiration. And I think space exploration, when astronauts talk about looking at the Earth, you're inspiring the next generation to go forward and do more. And so for those nights on the mall, what really made me cry even more was looking at the faces of 10-year-old kids totally nervous about, were they actually going to land on the moon? And you're like, we know how this ended. It all was good. Nothing bad happened. But to bring that moment back to the American public was incredibly fun.
I had the privilege of seeing that, and thank you for giving that to us. It was absolutely amazing. And I truly agree with you about space inspires. It motivates us. It opens us to the future, and having the privilege of talking to young students and sharing with them, I don't care, every classroom we've been in where we've been able to talk about what we're doing, their eyes just light up. And I truly believe if you can imagine it, we can make it happen. And science fiction becomes science fact on a regular basis, and that's our future. It's amazing. So I'm going to use my privilege as chair of this august panel to share my memory. And it was on that final flight, the first space station assembly mission, and we had opened up the space station for the first time, and we were really busy, but I had one crew member that stayed up later than anybody, Dr. Jim Newman, and he was always up on the flight deck doing things, and I told him, you can stay up as long as you want, just be quiet, don't wake anybody, because I had a couple other crew members that they had to have 8 hours of sleep. And Jim wanted to go in the space station one more time before he went to bed, and he was up on the flight deck, and he goes down on the darkened mid-deck, and you know, there's crew members that velcroed to the wall sleeping, and there was this area when you went back to where the airlock was to get into turn up to go into the International Space Station. It was a big empty area, and we had these things, we call them refrigerator bags. They were stowage bags that brought equipment up. 2 were on the floor, 2 were on the ceiling, and there was a little space between them that you could get to where the airlock was. And I had chosen to sleep between 2 of those bags because it felt more like laying in a bed. It put pressure on me, and I was getting good airflow, and it just felt comfortable. And my flight engineer, Nancy Curry, my arm operator, she was between the other 2, and Jim knew that if he woke anybody up, he'd be in trouble. So he's real quiet, and he sneaks through, and he turns up, and he goes into the space station, and who does he see but me and Sergei Krikalev? and we were both staying up late. We work our time in space to have 12 hours of work and 12 hours off, where you have 2 hours to get ready for bed, 8 hours of sleep, and 2 hours to get ready for the workday. And so if we had an 8-hour sleep period that was like at 11 o'clock at night to 7 in the morning, it's already like 1 o'clock in the morning, right, when Jim comes in. And the three of us stayed up there doing get-ahead tasks, trying to get it ready for the first crew. We were pulling launch restraint bolts and doing all kinds of stuff. Astronauts want to get everything done they possibly can and more. And so we were getting it ready for the first crew, and we stayed up till like 3:30, 4 in the morning. And I finally, at about 4 o'clock in the morning, would have been 4 in the morning, I said, guys, we got a really busy day tomorrow. We got to get at least 3 hours of sleep. We're done. But that was so special that night, being in there with the crew, just talking about the future of the space station and what it meant, what it was going to grow to from that small beginning. And I will never forget that. That's one of my favorite memories. So we have a number of students that have been participating in this from Monaco, and I would be remiss if I didn't take a couple of student questions. So I'm going to start with this one. This is from Juliet. She's 17, and she asks, what's the strangest or most unexpected object you've discovered in space, or your strangest discovery about space? Anybody want to? I'm gonna go to Dr. Stofan first. What do you think the strangest thing?
The one thing that I think that really surprised us is a few years ago there was an object that passed through our solar system, and I can't even begin to pronounce the name. Bill might be able to. It's like Uma Handra. I'm sorry, I don't remember the name of it. But we finally figured out it was actually basically an asteroid from outside of our solar system. And to me, this idea that you have objects that are not from within, you think of our solar system as being this place, and we have our stuff and our family of planets. And here, this visitor from elsewhere in our galaxy came and did a little cruise through our solar system and went on its way. And I just thought it was kind of magical.
This next one's from the students of Monaco's Aeronautic Club. And how do you see the role of small nations like Monaco in the development and advancement of space technologies? Anyone want to tackle that? Jaret?
Well, that's an easy one for me. So Monaco is currently developing critical technologies for our rover, as I mentioned earlier, particularly batteries and tires. The challenge with the lunar environment is the long night. You have to store enough energy to be able to hibernate and survive to come out the other side of the night. And so our rover actually has as much energy capacity as a Model 3 Tesla. It's a huge battery, and it needs to be super efficient in terms of its energy density, and it has to withstand extreme temperatures. Same with the tire. It has to be super resilient and withstand years and thousands of kilometers of driving on the surface. Space is big enough for all of us to play a role, and certainly Monaco, while small, is playing a big role in our missions. Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to take this next one. If you could return to space for a mission, which one would you choose and why? Any one they'd give me, just so I could go back. I only got to do short duration missions, and Mike, you can add your perspective on this, but I would have loved to have done a long duration mission to be able to truly live and work in space for an extended. My longest flight was 16 days, and you just can't get enough of it. You are so busy on the space shuttle, you have no free time at all, and oftentimes you don't really get to appreciate what a unique opportunity you have and how special it is. And I was told first-time flyers make a memory. So give us a perspective between a short duration mission like you do with Axiom or when you commanded Expedition 14.
Well, you remember that when we started doing long duration missions on the ISS, there were sort of two camps at the office, people who wanted to just stay local and train in Houston and fly 2-week missions, and those who said, I'm going to take the adventure and go to Russia and train and be up there longer. And I had flown 3 shuttle missions, all about 2 weeks, and really was intrigued by this idea of going to Russia, but I was a bit worried because you know how there are sprinters and marathoners. I always thought of myself much more as a sprinter, and so I was a little bit worried about how I was going to feel, you know, on week 3 after I had already come home on the other flights. And it turns out, at least my experience, it's really all about having useful work to do. And so when you're busy, and at that time the space station crew was 3 people, so really 1 American or 1.5, depends on which increment it is. You know, you're sort of the tip of the spear for the entire mission control team. And so there's a ton of, I'm sure it's a lot of responsibility, but there's also a lot of fulfillment when you're doing these tasks for the team. And I just found that was energy for me. And I really never, we were supposed to be up there for 6 months. About a month in, they said, no, it's going to be 7. You know, just a Soyuz rephasing of the launch time. And that was, at that time, that was the longest mission that we'd ever flown. And I only started thinking about coming home, you know, maybe a week or 2 before we came back. So I find that it's really not so much about long versus short, but, you know, are you busy, are you engaged? And that's something to think about when these crews go to Mars. 6 to 8 months, are they going to have enough to do? I worry about that.
Okay, I got another question for you. I had the privilege of seeing Mike launch from the Baikonur Cosmodrome. Give me the difference between launching on a shuttle and launching on a Soyuz.
So I'll say they're very different. The shuttle, as you know, solid rocket boosters, a lot of noise, a lot of vibration. When it goes off the pad, it leaps off the pad because the solid rocket boosters ignite instantaneously, and the thrust goes up to, you know, combined about almost 7 million pounds or 6 million between the two, like that. And so it just jumps off the pad. And then the first 2 minutes under the solids is, like I said, a lot of noise, a lot of vibration. It's actually somewhat difficult to read the displays. On the Soyuz, it's really smooth. It's all liquid fuel, so the ignition starts several seconds before launch, and it just builds up. And actually, there are no hold-down fittings. The shuttle is actually attached to the launch pad by 4 bolts on each skirt of the solid rocket booster. Big bolts, like that big, that at T0, the same instant the boosters light, these little cartridges explode these frangible nuts, the bolts fall down, and the shuttle goes up. The Soyuz is just sitting on the launch pad, and when the thrust is strong enough to overcome the weight, it just kind of lifts off. So it's pretty calm. Other than that, the G profile is about the same because the physics are the same. You're going from 0 to, you know, roughly 17,000 miles an hour in about 8.5, 9 minutes. So that area under the curve is about the same. Completely different inside, though. I mean, the Soyuz is small. Small.
You have no idea. If you could see, if from that arm of his chair to the arm of my chair, I mean, not even that far, maybe about here, you got 3 people crammed in side to side. You're sitting in this cayuta, you're like this, you know, and I don't know how you did it.
Not sure either. So, to answer your question about which mission would you rather do, anyone they would give you, think about that, because...
No, I'd sit in a Soyuz if I could go again. Absolutely. So one final student question before I give everybody a chance to sum things up before we close for the afternoon. The psychological aspect of going, you know, to Mars for a long duration flight compared to a short duration flight. Anyone want to comment on what they think the differences are, or what are we doing at NASA to help, you know, put the right crews together to be able to handle 2 years together? You know,
I can state the problem, and the problem is exactly that. You know, when you're on the ISS, first of all, you have this beautiful planet below you all the time, day or night. Both views are interesting. You can literally call any phone number on Earth. I won't say anytime you want, but pretty much anytime you want, and have a relatively normal conversation, meaning the delay time is pretty insignificant. When you're on your way to Mars, you're not going to know which of those white dots behind you is Earth. And secondly, if you pick up the phone and you say hello, it might take minutes for somebody else to say hi back to you. So I think the psychological aspects of a Martian mission are non-trivial, which is another reason we need that breakthrough in propulsion technology.
Yeah, there's a lot of research. I was amazed when I was chief scientist of NASA how much research is going on the mental health aspects of a mission to Mars, from looking at other areas where people are super isolated, like in doing submarine duty, doing overwintering in Antarctica, to actual experiments that NASA and other space agencies around the world have run of actually putting a group of people and kind of locking them up, they volunteer, and seeing what are the group dynamics, what are the stress points, and trying to, as much as they can, simulate a mission to Mars, because you really have to worry about that. One of the things that always made me laugh was food, because think about it for mental health. I never thought of mental health and food as being really tied together, but that's one of the things they've really learned from the ISS. You give people bad food, they're going to be grumpy. But this issue of using the ISS, and I think, Mike talked about it, but the importance of that platform for the last 25 years in getting us ready to go to the moon, and then on to Mars cannot be understated.
It's just been an absolutely tremendous test bed for learning how to live and work in space and develop the systems that we need for long-duration spaceflight to keep humans alive, both going in and on the moon and on to Mars. I can't say enough good things about ISS. So, Jaret, if you had a chance to go to Mars, would you go?
In a heartbeat.
Okay. Bill, if Grace let you go, would you go?
I have to calculate my age and what is my life expectancy. But if I had a chance to go back to space, I would definitely do it. And I think I'm still mentally and physically fit to do it.
So John Glenn was 77. I'm holding out hope. I'm ready. Some closing remarks. I'm going to give everybody a chance before I say a few words, but I'm going to start with you. Anything you'd like to share?
For the kids that are watching, just keep your hopes, your visions, your optimism alive, because this is going to be an exciting, exciting generation to be a part of what we are going to discover and what you are going to discover.
Thank you. Jaret?
Well, first, thank you for coming and having a listen, and thank you to the ambassador for hosting this great panel. Yeah, I think it's underappreciated how extraordinary this moment in human history is. We have several of the richest people on Earth pouring billions of dollars into solving the long-haul transportation problem to get from the Earth to the moon or Earth to Mars. And these vehicles are now starting to come to life and starting to have some success. And so we're just a few years away of really gaining large-scale, frequent access to these new areas. And the moon has a surface area the size of Africa. So this is truly like gaining access to a new continent over the next few years. And there's only been a few times that's happened throughout human history, right? And at scale, Of course, we've been to the moon already with humans, but to have the ability to actually land enough stuff on the moon to actually create industry and create a sustained human presence in the next decade is incredible. And I'm just really grateful to be a part of it. Yeah.
Mike.
Yeah, I would pick up on the thread that Jared started about this being a particular moment in history. For decades, the only people involved with human spaceflight were countries, and not very many of them. And now, because of what's happening in this new space era, with companies being able to launch every couple of days, and other companies building platforms to continue the work of the International Space Station, and I think someday companies will be on the moon. It's really a moment that we can share with more and more people. We used to call it democratizing access to space. I think now it's more making access to space a reality for more people because it's still not terribly democratic. But it's true that a country the size of Monaco can have an outsized footprint in what's going on. And I think that the avenues for people to be involved, whether it's your experiment, whether it's your technology, whether it's you flying in space, are something that has never been pondered before. And it's an important thing because, as has been mentioned by Senator Nelson, the view of the Earth from space is something that changes you fundamentally. You've probably heard the term the overview effect, and I firmly believe that to be true. And to date, something like 630 people have ever seen that. And when that number gets to be multiplied by 100 or 1,000 or 1,000,000, it'll be a different world.
Couldn't agree more. Thank you. Ellen.
Well, I always like to say to kids, I think we're on the edge of a whole new era of understanding beyond our planet. So whether it's the Smithsonian's work, not just imaging black holes, but maybe even soon being able to take movies of black holes, trying to understand how that physics works, to the telescopes that Bill talked about, that we're going to be searching for that Earth 2.0, that Earth beyond us. I just think we're on the edge of a whole era of new discoveries, new exploration that I think is incredibly exciting. And again, want to say thank you to the ambassador and thank you to His Serene Highness for his devotion to really helping make life on this planet, life in our oceans, sustainable.
Thank you. I don't feel like I've scratched the surface. I could go on asking you guys questions all afternoon. It's truly an honor and a privilege for me to call you colleagues and friends. I really have enjoyed talking with you, and I hope the audience has enjoyed it as much. And I'd like to sincerely thank the ambassador and the Kennedy Center for helping make this possible. I think it's been an awfully fun evening, and I wish you all the very best. This is an amazing time in space exploration for all our nations, and this is our future. This is what's happening. We've got a long ways to go, but it's going to be an amazing ride. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to find out if our audiovisual just throw the picture of Monaco taken from Scott Skelly from space. Here it is. With the little thing there.
Awesome.
Something to remember.
All right.